So Cameron and Kaden Boozer reportedly visited Kentucky this past weekend. Cameron Boozer, of course, number one ranked player in the class of 2025. His brother, also a top 20 player in that class. Their father was an All-American at Duke. This weekend, they're at Kentucky. Could you see the Boozer boys, as they say, going somewhere other than Duke?
I think it's possible. I think I'll just say this is that, they have two parents and everybody talks about, their dad and where he played. But I think a really important part of this one is what does mom think? And, this is, there's a couple different perspectives to consider here, and everybody is only talking about where dad played. But there's a couple different voices to consider here. And, this as well as I do, GP. Like, Duke and Kentucky, they really don't recruit against each other as often as you think. It's almost like they kind of establish first, like, is this a Duke kid or is this a Kentucky kid? It's very rare that you see them go head to head for somebody right now. Like, Kentucky's not recruiting Cooper Flagg. You know what I mean? Like, Duke's recruiting against Kansas and UConn for him. The guys that Kentucky is recruiting, Duke isn't recruiting this year. So there's really not much overlap. It's certainly not although they are kind of the two biggest brands in the world of recruiting, I don't know that they go head to head as often as they did maybe 5 years ago. So for the Boozers to take a visit to Kentucky shows you that at least Kentucky thinks like, hey, we're going to take a swing at this one here. And there are plenty of other schools that are going to do that too, because the messaging from the family is that this is not a foregone conclusion that they just end up at Duke. It's certainly a possibility, but Duke's got to recruit them. And this is not like, hey, your dad played here, so you're going to play here too. It's not an automatic. And I think last week's visit, if any, more than anything else, it was indicative of that very, very theme, is that this is not a granted for Duke. It's possible, but it's not automatic.
You mentioned Cooper Flagg, and we'll get to his recruitment in a moment. But obviously, he has, in recent months, reclassified. He was originally in the class with the Boozers to 2025. Now he's 24. There was a lot of talk in the summer about how no school wanted or needed Cooper Flagg to reclass more than Duke, because they wanted Cooper Flagg to be in a different class than Cameron Boozer, because there was some thought that Duke could get them both, but they didn't want to play together. And now Cooper Flagg would theoretically be a one and done, gone before Cameron Boozer even enrolls. Any substance to that at all, what I just described?
That was complicated by the fact that both Cooper Flagg and Cameron Boozer are twins. Cooper's twin brother Ace has remained in the class of 2025. He's at Montverde. And so it wasn't just, can these two play together? It was, if they both want to go to school with their twin brother, Cameron with Kaden, of course, can all four of them fit on the roster, and are that many scholarships available to allocate and still get what you need to get? So I think that was the math behind it. I don't have any question that Cam Boozer and Cooper Flagg could not only play together, but could flourish together. I don't think that's going to happen, because I think, unless Cameron ends up reclassifying up, Cooper is certainly expected to be on a one and done path. The reason why the reclassification was not a surprise for Cooper, though, is because he has a late December birthday, which makes him one and done eligible. Cam is not one and done eligible. And of course, Kaden, they have the same birthday. Obviously, they're twins. But so if they were to reclassify up, which doesn't have anywhere near the same momentum, but some people are wondering, because we've already had a player do that, go from 2025 to 2024, and that's Jaden Quaintance. Jaden Quaintance is currently a top 10 prospect in the class of 2024, but he would be an ultra young college freshman next year. In fact, he is not age eligible to be one and done. So it's kind of like that Amani Bates situation back from a couple of years ago. Interestingly enough, he just visited Missouri. So he could be the last piece to Dennis Gates's class. He's also considering Cincinnati. He's also considering Kentucky. I think he's going to consider G League Ignite as well, because it would give him a professional pathway sooner than he would otherwise have access to it. So those are some of the questions. But as it relates to your original point about, needing Cooper to reclassify up, I think Duke, I think it was more about the fact that Cooper was just so good this spring and summer. There was so much NBA attention, and he was one and done eligible. I really think that was the driving force.
I do want you to update us on his recruitment. obviously now number one prospect in 2024, visited UConn this past weekend. What's the latest on the reclassified phenom from the state of Maine?
The state of Maine. How about that? He's considering three schools: UConn, Kansas, and Duke. Now, each school was trying to get him on their campus for their big fall event. As a UConn alum, I can tell you that the football game doesn't really do the trick over there in Stores. But for UConn, what they were really hoping to do was get him on campus for their ring ceremony from last year. He's going to be playing on national television that week in Las Vegas, though, so that wasn't possible. Kansas and Duke both bringing him in for their respective Midnight Madness type celebrations. So he's going to take those visits, and ultimately he will choose among one of those three, is what we are led to believe, with Duke being the perceived favorite. So we'll see how that goes.
Do you have any questions about him? Not to get too off the subject, but forget college. As an NBA prospect, is Cooper Flagg a sure thing to you, or is there some things that are sources of concern?
I think that anytime you're talking about a 16-year-old kid, there are uncertainties. And I think that some of the hyperbole, let me preface it by this. I think it is unfair to put the type of expectations. I mentioned Amani Bates earlier. I've said this before many times now, but I think as a whole, this community, meaning the grassroots basketball community, and in particular people who work at major media outlets, should have learned lessons based on what happened to Amani Bates and how we label these kids at such an early age. So I know for myself, I have. So I try and be very deliberate with some of the words I use and expectations that I put on these kids, while still acknowledging how special and unique their ability is. Cooper is, let me say this unequivocally, he's the best prospect in high school basketball, in my opinion. But some of the things that I've heard thrown out over the course of the last month or two, like better than Wembanyama, best prospect since LeBron, it's like, hold on a minute, and look, again, let me be clear. That is not a knock on Cooper whatsoever. It's just to say, like, people just get so caught up in wanting to be right first, and say, I knew it first. And if you look at Cooper's numbers, they were spectacular last year. But he was playing in the E16 division. He wasn't even in like the full EYBL. You look at his numbers at Montverde last year, averaged 9 points per game. He was the fourth leading scorer on that team. So there's still some things to prove without question. But as I said, I think he is the best prospect in high school basketball. He is, I've said this before as well, he's the best shot blocker I've seen at his age who's not 7 feet tall. I mean, his defensive instincts are off the charts. He is A+ in competitiveness, in intelligence, and in versatility on both ends of the floor. He's a terrific prospect. But anytime you're 16 years old, you've got lots of questions still left to answer.
If you go back to Peach Jam, that is when, even though people expected him to reclass, technically Cameron Boozer and Cooper Flagg were in the same class at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just sort of asking coaches, whenever I sat down, like you did with Dennis at an event, sit down with coaches, I'm just sort of picking their brains, like, hey, how much you seen Cooper? How much you seen Cameron? What do you think? And the I don't know if it was the consensus, but what I heard from multiple coaches is obviously they're both special talents. Mm-hmm. You can't be ranked this way, regarded this way, without being a special talent. What I had multiple coaches tell me was that if you were trying to win a game this weekend, they would rather have Cooper Flagg than Cameron Boozer. But if you were trying to win a game in 6 years, they would rather have Cameron Boozer over Cooper Flagg. Do you subscribe to any of that?
I don't know. What I will tell you is that 3 months prior to that, I think that Cam Boozer was the player that most people were saying was the best player in high school basketball. I think part of the context gets lost among people because you go to Peach Jam and the whole basketball community is there. And so that's your best opportunity for people to kind of get a sense of these guys. Cam Boozer was sick that week, like playing through illness that week. And that was not the best version of Cam Boozer. I think Cam Boozer has an incredibly high floor, meaning, I think he's a guy who's going to be really hard to miss. Exactly, what his upside is, what his ceiling is, I think that remains to be seen. But we're talking about a guy who's 6'9", who's really skilled, who's incredibly smart. I mean, a big time passer, moves laterally really, really well, there's still some things he needs to add. He too played in the 16 and under division this year, and I think both of those guys could have played in 17 and under and been just fine. AJ Devonta, who's currently a sophomore, although I think he'll end up in the 2025 class. He led the Peach Jam in scoring this year. So he's another one of those young players in that same conversation with those two among in my opinion, the best 3 prospects in high school basketball.
So I won't hold you to it, but just to get it on the record, while recognizing a whole lot of stuff can change between now and then, would it be your prediction based in this moment in time that Cooper Flagg enrolls at Duke, plays 1 season, and then Cameron Boozer enrolls at Duke, plays 1 season? Is that what you're expecting?
I'm expecting both of them to be currently on a one and done track. I think Duke is the favorite for both at this point, but I do think there are going to be more surprises in the Boozers recruitment than people necessarily expect.